When I was 25 and finishing up my master's degree, I moved in with a boy for the first time. We'd been together for over a year and got along well. He'd seen my apartment enough to know that I was obsessive about my coffee and incapable of cleaning. I'd spent the night enough to know that he talked to himself while getting ready in the morning, and we genuinely just liked each other. There were bumps to learning to live together, of course. I was an only child and had always picked studios over living with a roommate in the past, so having someone always one step behind me, always touching my things, took some adjustment. I stepped on more shoes, bumped into more chairs and glasses, and sat on more ice-cold toilet bowls in those first few months than I ever had, or probably ever will again in my life. I was a hoarder who had suddenly found herself in possession of twice the amount of crap, so our guest room became more like a small bedroom filled with giant boxes of random stuff that I knew I didn't need, but was not allowed to touch. He was a fidgeter and couldn't keep his legs still as we watched movies on the couch, and the number of ways I imagined killing him with his own damn dirty socks that he always took off and left in our bed should probably give me a disturbing insight into the dark recesses of my psyche. Eventually, despite all of this, we found something of a rhythm that worked. I am whatever the opposite of a morning person would be. So he would get up first in the morning and shower. Then he would make my coffee for me, since I never figured out how to set the timer on the pot, and have his breakfast, pour my coffee, and then bring me the cat as an adorable meat shield. I would grumble and get up, look before I peed and drank my coffee. Then we'd go about our days and reconvene in the evenings to watch movies or play video games. It worked so well that after 6 months, he asked me to marry him, and I said yes. Of course, as soon as we planned everything, he got the fellowship offer. As an artist hoping to live off his paintings, the art scene in our small college town couldn't exactly be considered booming. He looked around for a long time for an opportunity to move elsewhere, but then he'd met me, and we hit it off. But now, here was an amazing chance to go to Chicago and work with established painters and make all kinds of connections he couldn't even dream of here. So now, with 2 months to go till the wedding, and a year left in my program keeping me tied here, we started consider spending our first year of marriage separated by hundreds and hundreds of miles. I wanted to say no. I really did. But I didn't have the heart to ask him to give up his dream, the same way he didn't ask me to come with him. Instead, he asked the program head for permission to miss the first week for our honeymoon, and then he moved away 2 weeks after the wedding. The first night was soul-crushing. He sent me Snapchats of the cute little brownstone he had a room in, video chatted to show me the view from his window and how teeny tiny the shower in his bathroom was. But deep down, there was a hollowness to the interactions, something to indicate that for the next year, neither his little brownstone nor my beat-up 2-bedroom apartment on the edge of campus would really be home. The cat probably had the hardest time adjusting. Apparently, I played with her wrong, and so anytime I tried to dangle her favorite toy, a bird attached to a long stick by a string in front of her, she'd stare at me until I gave up and set it down. Immediately after, she'd snatch it up into her mouth by the bird and drag it around the apartment, meowing at every door to coax my husband out to play. That night, I sat next to the door of the spare room with her and cried while she stared at the white wooden frame expectantly. The next morning, I woke up to the blaring of my new alarm. Feeling drained, I got out of bed with eyes swollen from both tears and sleep, put down the seat and peed while brushing my teeth at the same time because I was just out of fucks to give. The process of washing my face seemed a little more like slapping water onto it, but I felt marginally more human by the time I emerged from the bathroom, only to hear the sound of the coffee pot from the kitchen. I smiled. He had figured out how to set the timer for me. I pulled out my phone, sent a quick text to say I love you, and poured myself a steaming mug. Even still, I fell into a depression for the first few weeks until slowly coming around to my new reality. Despite the distance, or maybe because of it, my husband was as affectionate and attentive as I could have asked for, and I fell asleep most nights while he chatted about his day on the phone. It was nice not to feel alone. The intimacy kept the marriage from withering. We made sure to carve out time daily, texting on breaks and having at least a quick call before bed every night. Since suddenly, we were a two-household marriage, I'd taken on extra hours on top of my schooling and began coming home less and less that fall. Unfortunately for Kitty, what time I was home was generally spent studying or attempting to tidy up, and she seemed totally disgusted with me. Despite being a needy cat, I rarely ever woke up to find her at my feet anymore, and she almost never demanded pets like she used to, but she still carried around that stupid bird, meowing at every door she saw before falling asleep in front of the guest room door. I tried letting them Skype to pull her out of it, and even considered getting another cat, but decided really, she seemed content enough and just distant and let it be. By the time my husband had been gone for 3 months, I think life was as good as it could be considering the circumstances. I'd been making sure to see my friends often, and he had gotten close with his roommates. And even though we couldn't see each other, we stayed involved as much as possible. So when we missed our first nightly call, I brushed it off. I had stayed out later than I meant to, so I couldn't be angry that I had gotten his voicemail. Besides, he called me as soon as he got up the next morning, and we chatted while I put bruise cream on that stupid mark on my hip from the kitchen stool that never seemed to be where I expected it to. Like every other day, I poured my coffee, told him I loved him, and went on my way. A week later, he didn't answer again. This time, I was a bit more annoyed. I had made sure to come home on time. I scratched a new spot on the sofa while I took calming breaths through his voicemail message and managed to have my tone sound light and pleasant as I let him know I was going to bed, but could be reached in the morning, and I loved him. Despite what I had said, I spent the night seething. A storm outside my window kept me awake, and the chill leaking in made me acutely aware of how large and cold the bed really was. As I flopped around restlessly, I could hear the cat scratching at the guest room door, and it frustrated me until I threw a pillow in her direction and the sound of little claws scampering against the hardwood floor replaced it. After a giant clap of thunder startled me and cut the power, I finally resigned myself to knocking back a sleeping pill and burying my face under the blankets until I drifted into a fitful sleep. Instead of calming me, the slumber seemed to have energized my anger. So when I woke up the next morning to an unsatisfying apology text and a cold coffee pot, I gave up hiding my irritation. Pressing the button on the coffee pot, I dialed his number and lifted the phone to my ear.
Hello?
His voice was groggy, and I hadn't considered the time difference. How do I set the coffee pot? I snapped, bypassing the small talk.
What?
The confusion bled through, grating on my nerves even more. The timer on the coffee. My power went out last night, so I need to reset it.
We never figured it out.
He mumbled quietly.
There wasn't a way to set anything but the clock.
Okay, yes, but it's been working fine for the last 3 months, so what the hell happened? We both knew I was talking about more than just the coffee pot, and the silence hung awkwardly over the line.
Hun.
He started, but I decided I didn't want to do this right now, and cut him off. It's fine. I'll figure it out myself. Go back to sleep. I hung up the phone and turned my phone off, poured myself a cup of coffee, and watched shit shows on cable for a few hours instead of doing my homework that I'd sworn to myself I would do. I stayed there for most of the day, only allowing myself to turn on my phone every few hours to check to see if he said anything. A few more apologies, some terse requests to stop ignoring him, and a missed call. Finally, around 6 p.m., I checked it again, and found one a little over an hour old.
It's the TX600, right? That model doesn't even have a timer.
I scoffed and stood up, walking over to the coffee pot. Of course it had a timer. I bought it specifically because of the timer. The whole point was having coffee waiting for me, just like it had been every damn day. Yeah, I sent back after checking. TX600. I don't know what to tell you. I've had coffee every morning since you left. You must have looked up the wrong one. Some old black and white movie was on, and when he hadn't gotten back to me by the time the credits were rolling, I grabbed my computer and pulled up the manual myself. Sure enough, no timer. The clock was just that, a random clock on the side of the coffee pot. Several reviews noted that the redundancy of yet another clock in the digital age, but that it worked just fine otherwise. So, how had the coffee been ready for me every morning? Deciding I must have just been going crazy, I went into the bathroom to brush my teeth for an early bedtime tonight. I'd slept poorly the night before, and it was clearly messing with my head. After rinsing and spitting, I turned around to use the toilet, and it wasn't until my hand met the lid instead of the seat that I noticed that the toilet seat was down. The seat was down. Wait, why was that weird? I lived alone and had no reason to change the toilet from a sitting position. It had taken me months to get used to the seat never not being down. And then once I'd gotten used to it, I didn't even notice when it never stopped. There had to be a logical explanation for this. Maybe without thinking, I'd gotten into the habit of lifting it. What else was it? A toilet ghost? And clearly, I just wasn't as much of a coffee connoisseur as I thought, and not noticing the pot had been brewing it the night before when I put the water and beans in it, rather than just before I woke up. It made sense. At least more sense than anything else. So I held to it and took another pill and went to bed. I didn't wake up the next morning until the cat nudged my face for food at nearly 11. I must have been exhausted to sleep that long, but I still felt groggy and weighted down. I rolled my eyes at my lack of text and scooped her some food. I drank some water as she ate happily, then grabbed her toy again and walked over to the guest room door to meow at it. "There's no one in there," I cried, walking over and grabbing the stick. "I'll play with you. Jeez." She meowed again and scratched at the door. "Holy shit!" I snapped, grabbing the handle roughly and shoving the door open. "He's not there. Look!" I trailed off once I looked in the room myself, seeing boxes neatly stacked in a way I had never bothered to do. Maybe he'd... But no. The guest bed was slept in too! I wandered over towards it cautiously as Kitty happily sniffed around the boxes and immediately hopped into one as if she did it daily. A tablet sat charging at the foot of the bed. It had no lock, and as soon as I hit the power button, the screen filled with images of my bedroom. The outfit I had taken off the night before lay crumpled at the foot of my bed. I reached out in horror and touched the screen, and the image changed to the inside of my car. I swiped again. My office! Finally, a brownstone I'd only ever seen in pictures. But this was clearly not a picture. Red and blue lights flashed against the face of it, and people crowded outside, craning their necks for a view of what was going on. I couldn't hear the gasps or cries, but the fear and shock was plain on some faces, while morbid curiosity shined on others. An officer stood out front, keeping the crowd out front. And then, at that moment, my phone rang. Hey guys! Thank you for watching. I wanted to give a special thank you to Khostic for joining me on this video. Please go check out his channel. He has some great content. I will place the ball on the screen and a link to his channel in the description box. All my social media info will be below as well. And don't forget,